boy stood at the window, looking at the city as if it were the end of the world. Then he got a crazy nosebleed. The boy rushed to the internet to find out what was going on. A post on the internet said it was not a disease, but a curse. Once you've had a nosebleed and a hallucination, you will soon become a monster. The boy was reading about it. His stomach suddenly growled. There was nothing left to eat in the house, so he thought of the box of instant noodles outside his door. The boy opened the door cautiously. A large hand was suddenly placed on the door, and finally a monster entered his house. The boy was too frightened to breathe. The monster kept mouthing that he was invisible. It was the same monster that had half of its head cut off. Although the creature's head was half cut off, but his hearing was extremely sharp. The monster heard the noise coming from the stereo. It penetrated the stereo with its hand. Looking at the horrible creature in front of him, the boy could only lie still on the ground. He didn't dare to make a move. It was a good thing the monster didn't hear anything in the boy's house. He slowly walked out. After the monster left, the boy heard a noise outside the window. He opened the window carefully to check. A man was about to slide down the wall. The man told his daughter to take care of her brother. He would be back as soon as he found out what was going on. The man was about to go down when a huge head suddenly appeared behind him. The man is terrified and falls straight down the stairs. The monster looks into the room and sees the two children. Just as he was about to approach the children, a computer monitor hits him on the neck. The monster immediately came upwards. The boy on the floor was then entangled in the monster. The monster tightens its grip. The boy's breathing became more and more labored. Just as the boy was about to be crushed, the monster's neck snapped. The boy poked his head out to check on the situation. Next door, Uncle Kenny was sitting at the window. He had just saved the boy. The boy was about to speak when Kenny stopped him. Kenny then wrote down on a piece of paper. It said that the monsters would find him by the sound. And then Kenny wrote that the monsters would not die. The boy looked downstairs. The monster that had just had its neck broken was already sitting up. The two children downstairs were crying and screaming. The boy looked to Kenny. Kenny asked him if he wanted to save the two children. If so, come to his room. Kenny told the boy to put his phone on speaker, so that the phone would make noise when the monster came near. To save the two children, the boy opened the door and walked out of the house. The boy came to Kenny's room. Kenny asked him what his name was. The boy said his name was Jack. Kenny told Jack to run downstairs. He was handicapped and couldn't move his legs, so it was Jack who had to go. Kenny then took the weapon Jack was holding and modified it. Jack realized that Kenny was a weapons designer. He could build a tank if he had the materials to do so. Kenny pressed the modified weapon. What had been a normal weapon was now capable of discharging a huge increase in power. He told Jack that even so, he still couldn't kill the monsters. The best thing to do when you see one of those monsters is to run for your life. Jack, armed with Kenny's modified weapon, and goes to rescue the two children. He soon encounters the half-headed monster. Jack rushes to hide in the lift. There was a box of smelly fish in the lift. The flies were buzzing. Jack thought the monster had gone away, but just as he was looking around, the monster suddenly came back. The monster reached out and stuck his claws into the smelly fish. He heard the sound of the flies. Jack thrust his weapon. The monster screamed as it was electrocuted. Jack rushed to escape. He dashes down the hallway. The creature suddenly reached out with its claws at the sound. Luckily, Jack was quick to react. He was lucky to escape. The monster was slowly approaching Jack. Jack felt a bouncy ball next to him. He threw the bouncing ball. The monster's attention was drawn by the successive sounds. Jack ran up to the monster and struck it again. This time the creature was knocked to the ground. With the monster out of the way for now, Jack rushed to save the two children. He made his way to the children's house. He had to take them upstairs to Kenny's. Jack reassured the children not to be afraid, but he himself was scared to death. His hand on the children's hand was shaking. Jack took the two children out of the room. As soon as he stepped out of the room, he had another nosebleed. He was already infected. He was hearing voices in his head. Jack falls to the floor. A huge monster appeared out of nowhere. The two children tried to pull Jack away, but they couldn't. The monster was banging against the wall, and soon it came in. The monster reached out and grabbed the two children with its claws. Jack held on to the monster's legs for dear life. The children were told to run away. No sooner had the two children escaped, Jack was kicked out by the monster. Finally, the monster threw two punches at him in quick succession. Just as the monster was about to continue its attack, a neighbor arrives and slashes at the creature. The girl and the neighbor dragged Jack. They took him into a room. The two men saw Jack's dark eyes. They knew that Jack was an infected person, but they didn't do anything to Jack. He was still a human being. Jack didn't care how they treated him. He just begged them to go and save the 2 children. They agreed. The 3 men walked out of the room again. The 2 children were walking up the stairs. A half-headed monster appeared not far from them. The little girl thought of what Jack had said earlier. The creature could not see but could hear very well, so she covered her brother's mouth and her own. The half-headed creature slowly walks away. The 2 children went upstairs quietly. Suddenly there were heavy footsteps. The giant monster approached. It reached out and grabbed the 2 children. The half-headed monster hears the sound and strikes the giant with its claws. The 2 children take the opportunity to escape. The half-headed monster is dragged to the front by the giant monster. Then he swung his iron fist. The half-headed monster was beaten half to death. Then he threw him out of the window. The 2 children escaped and kept knocking on the door for help. Before they could knock on the door, the giant monster was already following them. Step by step, the giant monster walked towards the 2 children. A woman came out of nowhere. The woman told the monster not to touch the 2 children. She was kicked out by the monster. The woman stood up stubbornly. She was knocked to the ground by the monster's fist. Just then Jack arrived. Jack told the 2 children to run. The 2 children ran behind them. The monster turned and looked at them. The 3 men were about to attack. The woman who had fallen to the ground suddenly jumped on top of the monster. The monster let out a scream. The woman had been infected. The girl ran forward. She swung her baseball bat and hit the monster in the crotch. The monster screamed again. The neighbor rushed forward with his knife. He slashed at the monster's body. The monster rips the woman off his body. The neighbor deliberately drew the monster's attention so that the girl could escape. This monster is too powerful. They couldn't handle it. The monster came at the neighbor. The neighbor dodged and ran away. The monster followed after them. The girl goes to check on the woman on the ground. The woman's hands have turned into claws. The girl takes a baseball bat and defends herself. The woman looked up at the girl. Then her eyes went back to normal. She hadn't completely lost her mind. The monster chased the neighbor around the building. The neighbor kept running wildly, but soon he found himself in a dead end. He had no other choice but to fight the monster. The monster rushes towards the neighbor. The neighbor dodged and ducked out of the way. The giant monster broke through the window with no luck. It fell straight downstairs. The neighbor was lucky to be alive.